Madam President, it is 6 p.m. I've started the recording.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. We're going to open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mrs. Santiago.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silence for our special intentions, and as always, for our community to give us strength to forge ahead with our education plans. Thank you.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Here.
Dr. Henderson, Mr. Howard,
Here.
Mr. Levenstein,
Here.
Ms. Veda,
Here.
Ms. Mineo,
Here.
Ms. Santiago,
Here.
Mr. Stridiron,
Here.
Mr. Wall.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose: matter made confidential under FERPA, employment history of particular individuals, matters leading to the employment of particular individuals, and to obtain advice from legal counsel. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Veda,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron.
Yes.
Good evening, Madam President. The recording started back up.
Welcome, everyone, to the last meeting in June. I hope everybody had a great year. I'm going to turn this over to our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Badia.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, everyone. As Ms. Mineo indicated, this is our last Board of Ed meeting of the year, and we all just want to say thank you. Thank you for joining us every board meeting virtually, and thank you to all of our employees and our scholars for making it through this point. Just give me 1 second, and I'm going to share my screen. All right, there we go. Okay, so today is officially the last Operation Reopen Share Out. So, my team and I have been very consistent in making sure that at every Board of Ed meeting, we provide our Board of Ed as well as our community with a critical update as to what is happening in the district as we make the necessary arrangements and adjustments to reopening schools. So I just want to take us down quickly memory lane. And if you just take a minute to look over the slide, you'll notice that our district did a lot of work. I mean, you think about what Shoulder Up really meant and how it was embodied and how it was reflected throughout the entire community. You get these kinds of results. You get over 1,000 professional development opportunities that teachers engaged in, thousands of devices, including Chromebooks and hotspots, over 2,000 home visits conducted to make sure that our scholars were safe and making sure they had what they needed so that way they can get online and engage with their peers and teachers. Over 2,000 phone calls made, over 2 million meals served, and over 20,000 different pieces of feedback and input from our community over this past year in order to keep people connected and informed. You recall when we had to shut down. You also recall how we started the school year fully remote because of what was occurring in our community. And you can see here by this particular timeline, the various actions that needed to be taken, whether that was identifying vaccines, allowing our schools to be clinics so that way students and adults could get their vaccination. And as I already indicated, we provided multiple platforms for scholars, for teachers, for parents to weigh in and to share their thoughts. We clearly needed to make some critical adjustments. And so I'll be happy the day we no longer have to do the daily health screener, because that thing has had to change multiple times. And having to travel in hallways and be socially distant in the classroom as well as other common spaces throughout the district. This should look very familiar. This is something that we spent a lot of time on in the summer and in September when we phased in students over the year. And I can vividly remember the many parental phone calls that I had, the many times scholars reached out to me in the higher grades and said, we want to have in-person instruction too. When is it going to be our turn? And then let us not forget that that was just one option. The second option existed of students who were fully remote the entire time. They've yet to step foot in a school building. I'm sure you remember this disturbing slide with the percent of how fast COVID was going through each of the communities across New York State. And at that time, how high our community was. And the impact that we experienced as a result of being in the yellow zone, specifically not being able to open as quickly as other districts who were not in the yellow zone, our athletes not being able to practice or compete in their home district, and how we had to lean on our neighboring districts and partners in order for them to open up their facilities to our scholars. You also may remember how we shouldered up with some international partners. Newburgh was closely being followed and heralded for the work that we were doing as a community. So much so that FEMA, the CDC, reached out to us and said, will you support the US Virgin Islands in their reopening efforts? We had lengthy discussions about athletics and which team would be allowed to participate and which team had to engage in testing, and how seasons were shortened and how championships could not be played. And then all districts were required to engage in testing in order to stay open. And we did not have to force anyone to test. the adults in our district stepped up and said, in order to keep our schools open, we volunteer. So that way we can meet the threshold. So that way our children can continue to experience in-person learning. And then we had, at the time, 1 million meals served. And as I already indicated, in fact, throughout this pandemic, we served over 2 million meals. And then the constant changes to graduation. We were going to have 2 ceremonies, and then we were going to have 3 ceremonies. Well, as of last week, we're now going to have 1 ceremony this Thursday at 4 o'clock, and each graduate will get their 4 tickets. As you can see, and as you remember, there was tremendous communication and various plans that needed to be created by our teams and posted online to receive feedback. And so they existed of a number of guidebooks in order to assist families and teachers. And yes, we're still grappling with when school districts will no longer have to require adults and children to wear masks indoors. And so that is still a requirement. And we will continue to remain in compliance until that is lifted. And we're excited because our students asked for 1 ceremony, 1 last time. They can all be together in the same space and experience the traditional graduation. So scholars, to those of you who are watching, to our families, thank you for being patient. As you can see, in the end, it worked out so that way we can have the 1 ceremony. And on that note, I just want to personally, again, just thank our Board of Ed. I want to thank all of our faculty and staff members for shouldering up and making sure that throughout this pandemic, that we connected with our scholars, we connected with our families in order to get through this together. So again, today is the last report out for Operation Reopen. I will be providing the board updates throughout the summer for what the opening of schools will entail in September, but that's going to take on a different form and fashion. So again, thank you.
Board members, are there any questions or comments? Oh, Mr. Stridiron, yes, I see your hand. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. So when we return back to in-person board meetings, would it be possible for all of the people that cannot attend the meetings to be able to continue to watch on video?
Mr. Stridiron, that's one thing that we were trying to do because we've been having people watching the YouTube video, 265, 300 people watching at each meeting, which we never get in person. So I was hoping that we also could have the same setup so that people could participate that way. Yes, thank you.
So again, I want to say thank you. All right, 2.2 is a capital project update, and I'll quickly turn this over to Mr. Ramjo.
Thank you, Dr. Padilla. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just give a brief update on the status of the energy performance contract. As many of you may recall, we adapted the Amendment 3 to the contract in order to incorporate a number of windows at NFA Maine. And that is, all of that design and planning has been finalized and has been up to the State Education Department for about 2 weeks now, and it's anticipated to be reviewed within about 3 to 5 weeks, primarily because it's under the original contract and doesn't have to go through the normal processes. So as soon as that is approved, then we can start that work. On the capital side, for this coming summer, we initially planned on incorporating the career and tech demolition, the 2 structures that are on the CTE site, as well as New Windsor's tower. And our architect, Clark Patterson Lee, packaged these 2 together in anticipation of going out for bid. But unfortunately, only one of them was approved in time. The other is lagging behind. So the decision was made to break out the demolition of the New Windsor Tower, primarily because of the rigid time restraints in order to get the building demolished and get the site cleaned up before school resumes in September. So this evening, Mr. Luis Rodriguez from the Palumbo Group will present the steps and the processes of how that's going to unfold, and just so that everyone is fully aware and cognizant of what the expectations are. Lou?
Thank you, Roger, and thank you to the board, Dr. Padilla, Dr. Spindler. So I just want to talk to a brief process, what we're going through right now for our next phase of bidding. We did the first phase of bidding for the pool project. Right now we're going to go out to bid for, we are out to bid for the New Windsor Tower. So if you can move to the next slide. So I just want to talk about the construction process quickly, what the scope of work is. I want to talk about the staging logistics, and then just important things that I think we should remember as we go into construction. Next. So what's important right now, we meet as an executive committee. There's important things that we discuss all the time. In this particular phase, we talk about cost estimating. We estimate every single phase of work. So we want to make sure you guys understand that that's happening. Site logistics and planning. How are we going to construct while students and staff are in the buildings? Very important. Phasing plans. In particular to the New Windsor project, we have hazmat work. We have IT reconfiguration. And we also have a mass demo project, which is pretty important. Milestone schedule, which is part of the project, and then talking about the front end documents. Next. So talking, what do we do at the beginning? Again, we estimate, okay. We estimate the work, site logistics, yes. Next slide, please, sorry. There we go. Perfect. So we're currently out to bid for the, we're calling it 4A. There's a lot of different phases of the project. 4A is, project 4 is New Windsor. 4A is the demo of the tower. 4B is the addition and renovation. So we'll be coming out to, we're looking to go out to bid in the fall with that work. The bidding schedule, we're looking to take in bids on July 6th. We're looking to do contractor qualifications on July 7th. We are looking right now tentatively to have an executive committee to review a potential recommendation to the board and really talk about the pros and cons of the low bidders on July 8th. And then after that, we're really looking at making a recommendation to the board. Showing it right now to be determined because time right now is, of course, of the essence. And once we take in bids and we feel we have a great bid, we may be requesting that we have a special meeting just to award contracts. And that's just, me asking the board to keep time. Time is of the essence when it comes to, especially construction today. If we were able to have a good meeting on July 8th with the executive committee, after that, we would try to come up with a date that would be smart for the board to get together. We would make a recommendation. And then after that, we would have a contract kickoff meeting. And the kickoff meeting really talks to all the X's and O's as far as the rules for demoing the project and getting the contracts in place, insurances, bonding, and whatnot. So I wanted to throw up a calendar to show what we're looking to do. So this way the board would not be surprised when after July 8th if we ask for a special meeting. Next slide. So here I just really wanted to show the board, in case anyone doesn't know exactly what 4A is. If you look at the what we're pointing at, it's the tower. It's we're calling it the tower, but it's the older part of the building. It's 1930s, 20s, 30s vintage. It's about 13,000 square feet. And the idea is there's going to be a mass demo there. That building comes down, protection put in place, and the idea is here to get this site ready so that when we put the bid out for the addition, contractors come in and they see a clean slate. That's what's really important here. So the idea is to take the building down. We've already, the district has already been through to point out any items that are inside of the building that are important, that need to be removed prior to demo, and that's our goal. The first thing with this addition is going to be, there's an IT closet just for scope of work. There's an IT closet inside of this building. This IT closet gets removed, replaced into an existing room in the building. So we take care of IT. There's asbestos abatement that occurs in this building. We have to do the asbestos abatement. Once the asbestos abatement is done, we take the building down. Everything, we're looking soup to nuts to have this completed by the end of August. Next slide. This slide talks to site security and containment. This will be in the bid documents, or is in the bid documents. Everything in red talks to the area of containment. It talks to what we're buying from the contractors. There's going to be an 8-foot high fence. The fence will be have mesh in it for security purposes and visual. There's going to be a man gate. Everything in blue talks to egress of the building. So what's going to happen is, once the building is down, we are going to continue to keep that fence up going into the school year to really contain that area. And you'll see that there's an egress that's already in place for that. So again, this is part of the bid documents. And again, it's part of security, and this is what we buy for safety. Next. Just talking big plan. Again, safety's first. Student, staff, safety. Construction contractors are not allowed to talk to students or staff at all. Separated. Contractors are required to have ID badges. We work hard. It's construction. There will be inconveniences, but we work hard to make sure that we minimize that. We have the staff, students, and also your neighbors. Your neighbors will be inconvenienced. We are on site full time, and communication should be through the CM. Make sure that all communication is through us so that we can deal with any type of safety issues during construction. COVID plans are written into the general conditions. So the contractors still have to abide by the school district's COVID safety plans. So again, it's exciting. We're moving ahead. We're out to bid, and open up to any questions. Thank you.
Board members, questions? I see no hands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lou. So as was stated, there may be a need to have a special meeting to move some of this work forward. All right, so thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna move on with the rest of my section. Item 2.3 just represents the time of year where we have individuals who have served the district for a range of years, a number of decades in some cases, where we just honor and recognize them. So if you can please click the video for our board and our community to just recognize our retirees.
On behalf of the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Roberto Padilla, Board President Carol Maneo, Vice President of the Board of Education, Philip Howard, and the members of the Board of Education, congratulations on your retirement milestone. This year has been a difficult year for all of us, but you have shown tenacity, strength, fortitude, determination, and love for the scholars. This year, you have engaged in new learning, new procedures, new protocols, virtually and physically, while remaining dedicated to your profession. Although you were cautious during this pandemic, you kept teaching. Although you were concerned about yourself and your family, you remained focused. Although you had to figure some things out along the way, you kept watch over and in contact with our scholars.
It is employees like you that make a difference to our scholars in our district. We will miss you and your good work. Colleagues and students will miss you. So we would like to thank you for all your good work. Thank you for all you have contributed to this organization. We want to wish you well. We hope you enjoy and find new meanings beyond work. Retirement can be and will be the most meaningful years of life. You deserve all the best and may you find it. Congratulations.
So I know you all would have wanted to celebrate them in person, but given the circumstances, we all just want to say thank you to serving our scholars. Thank you for serving our community. Thank you for shouldering up, especially over the last 2 academic years. And may your retirement be filled with tons of joy and peace.
Thank you. I can only second the sentiments that Dr. Padilla just said. Thank you very much to all of you retiring. Enjoy your retirement. Have a great time and do what you really want to do. It's a new chapter, so have at it. Board members, any questions or comments?
Let's all just give our retirees a round of applause, please. Okay, again, thank you. Thank you so much for your service. Item 2.4 is a presentation from South Middle School, and I will either let Mr. Forget or Mr. Brown. I'll just pass it to you guys.
Thank you, Dr. Padilla. Tonight, we're going to hear the end of year report from South Middle School, a CSI school in the district. And I think you're going to be very encouraged to hear all of the wonderful things that are happening there under the leadership of Ms. Brooks. So Ms. Brooks, take it away.
It's not in the room, sir.
Ms. Amendola?
I don't see them either.
Yeah, I don't think I see any South representatives in the space, so give me 1 second.
I saw them when we first started at 6 o'clock, but I don't see them now.
Mr. McCoy, are they in the waiting room?
No, sir.
They're trying to log on now.
Okay, Ms. Brooks is, she's here. So Ms. Brooks, if you want to come off, turn your camera on, the board is ready for you.
Am I good? I think I'm good. Hi, good evening. Sorry for the wait. As you know, I'm Shantae Brooks. I'm the principal of South Middle School. This is my second year as a principal, and I just want to share the 2020 and 2021 School Comprehensive Educational Plan year in presentation with you. Okay, I'm just have to move this around. Okay, well, this evening, we're going to talk about the current state of the 2021 root causes and the SEP goals, and looking ahead into 2021 and 22 school year. The 5 areas of focus are positive interactions, the instructional feedback to students, social emotional learning and wellness, and parent communication, respect for all. Our number 1 positive interactions, we have 3 root causes. This is directly impact our chronic absenteeism rate. We really dove into the expectations of how students and adults are supposed to interact, and as well as the impact of how improved relationships can impact the chronic absenteeism list that we have currently at South Middle. We will prioritize tone and empathy and reduce the rate. However, we do understand that there was a pandemic year, so most school districts were not able to meet this goal, including us. We were on target for it. The current attendance percentage rate is 74.85%, and that is lower than the benchmark of 27.3% that we had back in January when we started bringing the students back in. And just to bring notice to 2018-19 school year, we still have a lower rate of chronic absenteeism as we do currently to now compared to 2018. We're still in a better state, even during the pandemic year. So we really, really honed on doing our home visits to try to have home visits to try to build the relationships with the family, as well as we identified a system to how to detect our chronic absenteeism rate earlier to try to interfere with the students and try to help them, support them to get back into the building. we're looking forward to keep those systems in place next year so that we can really reduce that rate. Number 2 is the feedback to students. As a SLT team, we really decided that all 3 root causes will not be able to kind of be focused on. So we did focus on the first 2. The last one was more of the feedback towards teachers and walkthroughs and so forth. But with the current year, we thought that it was more important to focus on giving meaningful feedback to the students and help them to engage in their learning and have a better outcome. Our goal was 75% of our teachers will regularly provide student clear and concise feedback. We did exceed the target by 77%, and we improved with providing feedback both verbally and in written. We will continue to address all 3 root causes for next year as well. Number 3, social emotional learning and wellness. As you may know, we have incorporated a program, Rethink Education and Brain Power Wellness, and we began on a multi-year approach. This is year 1 down, and we really feel confident that we're on the right path to do so. We have exceeded our goal, and we have implemented 10 units of Rethink Ed, and we'll be moving forward with the students using student logins and being able to assess their own SEL as well. And then we also have reduced our referrals. We have a 41 total to date, which I will actually say that 16 we have in May and 18 we have in June, and it's still less than 20 a month in order to assess the students that we had in person, which we only had about a good quarter of our students in person. We took the restorative approach this year, and we will continue with that with additional training and professional development for the entire staff looking into next year. Number 4, parent communication. The school has not implemented a system, so therefore that was our main priority. We did implement a system. We got very creative, and we started to really focus on positive interactions and continue a continuation of all of the information and updates for parents and families. We provide it in different languages. We provide it consistently via Parent Hub, robocalls, monthly family newsletters going out. We also have direct emails to families to just keep them updated and informed of what's happening in our school in order to increase our communication. So which we have done, coming from the parent survey, we have evidence of 75% of parents agree, and that was our goal. We did have in 2020, 56% parents agreed. January benchmark was 66%, and 2021 end of the year, we have a survey of 70% increased improvement, positive interaction with our parents here in the building. We look forward to really building that up as we branch out into social media and other formats that we have incorporated. Number 5 is respect for all. We realized that there was a lack of professional development that was consistent, and to provide staff on how to develop equitable practices, regardless of the race, culture, language, religion, sexual orientation, gender, or special needs. What we did we started embarking on professional development, and we began with creating another multi-year plan to do so. So we began this year by implementing implicit bias, as well as cultural awareness and culturally relevant teaching. We're going to expand on that going into our next following year. The goal was to get 53.5% of the students to agree or strongly agree that they are treated fairly in the building. In 2020, we had 43.5% of our students agree. January benchmark, we had 63% of our students, and now we're currently at 71% of our students strongly agree to the survey question they are treated fairly inside our school building. We're going to be moving towards expanding our PD calendar, aligned with the district as well, to provide more professional development in these areas. Looking ahead to 2021 and 22, our potential areas of focus for the next step. We have 4 commitments that we're making. Meaningful learning. Every child is engaged in meaningful learning that is relevant to them. That includes culturally relevant, identity relevant, regardless of any of their identities. Belonging. Every child feels safe, respected, supported, and a true sense of belonging. Identity, every child can see themselves reflected in teachers' lessons, in our leaders and curriculum, and our learning materials, and our relationships. we will have a strong, trusting relationship with adults and peers in the building. I just want to inform you that today we did have a meeting with our state representatives. And so these 4 commitments, they're very on board in the direction that we're going. We did pan it out a little bit more to be more descriptive in this language. This was just a draft, and we're going to continue working on it. We got some great feedback today, and we should be submitting our new SEP for the following year with a little bit more detail to be able to explain. I would also like to add that this past SEP that we created was really a very important step. Even the teachers agree how we really focused in our relationships, and we really dug deep to kind of figure out what is the root causes of why not only relationships are not blossoming, but teaching and learning as well. So we really feel proud about our following SEP, and it really gave us the foundation to be able to produce the SEP that we're coming up with this year. So I'm very excited to say that we will be addressing the root causes from last year that's going to be incorporated into this new commitment that we have for the state. We're on the right track for improvement, and we will be creating multi-year plans to reflect what we're doing in South. Thank you.
Board members, questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Brooks. I know it was a really challenging year, and I hope great success to you and your school. I'm going to, Mrs. Burton, I see your hand.
Hi, thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Ms. Brooks, for all your due diligence and your team at South Middle School. The only comment that I have around attendance, and you did make some progress, which is always great. My concern is the chronic kids who have chronic, absenteeism, and so I hope you're monitoring that because those are the early warning signs in regards to moving forward through middle school on to high school. So of those kids that have chronic from 1 year to the next, I just I'm just stay on top of it, which I know you are. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Brooks, I also just want to thank you for your leadership and just stay the course, stay focused, and you'll continue to realize the improvements that the school is trying to seek.
Thank you, Dr.
Madam President, that concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you. We're going to move on to public comments on agenda items. Mr. McCoy.
There was no public comment submitted on agenda items, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. We're going to move on to the Policy Committee. Mr. Howard. Okay, we'll jump over Mr. Howard. We'll come back to him, and we'll go to Library Committee. Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. We met on June 10th, and we have 4 resolutions on the agenda tonight. We also had the director's report, which discussed the June 14th Phase 5 full reopening of the library. We look forward to that and all the great opportunities for the children and the adults of the community in the summer, all the summer programs that are going to be happening at the library. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the Buildings and Grounds Committee. Mr. Levenstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So the Building and Grounds Committee met on June 16th, and the committee discussed resolutions 9.2 through 9.10 that it's on tonight's finance agenda. And that includes budget transfers, capital bond project consultant contracts, capital bond change orders, a donation of a batting cage, the district's next MERV 13 filter orders, and a tax cert. And in addition to those, we discussed with Mr. Velez a proposed new NFA burglar alarm system, floor maintenance supplies, summer schedules for both custodial and building and grounds staff and the Building and Grounds Department planned summer projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Madam
Levinstein.
President.
Mr. Howard, are you available at this point?
Yes, Madam President, I apologize for that.
Okay.
So, Policy Committee, we met on June 10th, and we discussed four of the resolutions that are on the agenda this evening. Resolution to adopt policy for first reading and core values. Also, a resolution about the district hiring practices, 4513 library material selections, number 5,000 student policy goals, and we also discussed a regulation 5459 grade level classifications. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to do the Personnel Committee. All the items that were discussed at Personnel Committee are on this agenda tonight. I'm going to move on to my section. Dr. Yeager is going to talk. He's our External Compliance Officer, and he's going to talk about his end of the year summary. Welcome, Dr. Yeager, and hello.
Good evening, Ms. Minion. Thank you. School board members, good evening. Superintendent Padilla, school officials, members of the Newburgh public community. It's a privilege to be reporting to you this evening on the compliance activities I undertook on behalf of the board with respect to the eligibility for students to participate in athletic programs and fine and performing arts programs based on board policies 5100 and 5411. I have some headlines and the board has received a more substantial earlier document from me detailing this material for public consumption and here for you as board members in this meeting. I'll try and deal with headlines and highlights. So I would headline this report by saying that school compliance with policies 5100 and 5411 was substantially strengthened in both substance and implementation during the 2020-21 school year. That being said, during the period from January through early June 2021, in particular, administrators and program supervisory personnel have made major improvements to the determination and implementation process for student eligibility under your policy. And as you know, that particular time frame, second semester, is due to the pandemic, wherein most athletics and fine arts, performing arts activities were deferred until this second half of your school year. Additionally, there has been an overall shift in 2021 toward promoting and sustaining students' academic performance as the keystone of your eligibility policy. Attendance is still a component of that, but it has moved into a more secondary position to academic performance. Work among the administrative team and staff team has focused on helping students to earn at least the 4.45 annual course credits called for in your policy, and strengthening and monitoring students' academic progress during each of your marking periods. With respect to the attendance component of eligibility linked to policies 5100 and 5411, the staff's oversight determinations will conclude with your 2020-21 school year by centering on the extent to which individual students have been in attendance 91% of the time, that's your policy standard, 91% of the time between January and June 2021 as a basis for making determinations for the 21-22 school year. Now, there are a number of contributing factors to these improvements and implementation successes And they were largely summarized in your high school co-principals memo incorporated into the documentation I provided to you earlier. But here in your meeting, I'd like to highlight a number of those. There was a clear development of an academic contract system with which students and faculty worked so that students at academic risk could earn eligibility in accordance with the academic standards inherently associated with your 5411. That it means undertaking the intervention efforts and the remedial efforts to complete academic coursework successfully and continue to earn passing grades toward the chance to earn credits. Second item, the orientation and training of staff. The third, and an extremely important one, the vigorous oversight of your principals, their communication, and their more comprehensive involvement of the relevant persons involved in this process of focusing on academic performance and the ultimate eligibility determinations. So this would include the students, the parents, the coaches and advisors, the counselors, the cohort administrators, your program supervisors, your principals, and central administration. There were routine intervention and routine integrated staff intervention and eligibility team meetings, which resulted in shared and accurate eligibility lists, as well as individual students' interventions being undertaken in those individual student cases. Finally, there was a process of ongoing meetings among school and central administrative leaders with the external compliance officer, and that would be me. In those meetings, I assumed the role of ensuring that the school and central administrative leaders created, developed, and implemented the necessary systems to have this kind of attention on an individual student basis to academic performance and the earned opportunity to be eligible to participate in these programs. At this juncture in June, what remains to be done are largely outlined in the processes and recommendations your co-principals have made. There is intention to implement an end-of-year notification system that will inform both individual students and their parents as to whether they would be eligible, have earned eligibility, or would be ineligible for participation in athletics and or fine and performance arts activities for 2021 and 22. And that would include the two components of your policy, the fact that they will have or will not have earned at least 4.5 credits in the academic calendar year and have earned a 91% attendance standard during the second semester. The second recommendation is to incorporate your summer school program within the credit completion opportunity students will have, so that those who perhaps have not earned the requisite 4-point credit, 5 credit minimum during the current calendar year would have a chance to earn those credits during your summer school program. That would, upon positive accomplishment of that purpose, include a re-notification of parents and students in August that those credits have been earned and eligibility was now reinstated. Finally, that there would be extensive summer professional development in advance of the 21-22 school year to build on this year's work. That would be critical. Now, I have some other observations and recommendations, and I'll conclude with these three broad areas of observation and recommendation. First, student attendance will remain an issue to be addressed more effectively going forward. it may be fairly observed for all the accomplishment of your academic performance integrated teams, it may be fairly observed that the school-based multidisciplinary team approach did not meet to discern the trends in individual attendance with the frequency or attention of promoting and monitoring academic eligibility and attendance eligibility simultaneously. The 91% standard was to be met at the end of the school year. The attention to the path of students toward that standard did not receive as much attention. That being said, to shift this pattern next year, it is recommended that holding weekly or at least 5-week student attendance team meetings be instituted as a useful procedure with respect to ensuring each student is on the path to achieving a 91% standard for annual attendance, and that the attendance and/or multidisciplinary team process be developed and incorporate interventions to counsel support and improve patterns among vulnerable students. This is a theme I just heard addressed in your middle school report and progress report. I think this is coupled with that. Secondly, focus groups may be of value as a means to debrief this 2021 policy implementation experience. There are many who participated successfully and thoughtfully in the evolution of your program this year, and their insights may be gleaned to formulate additional recommendations that I may not have made as your external compliance officer. These would include students, parents, teachers, counselors, coaches, advisors, support personnel, and certainly cohort administrators. Finally, accounting more explicitly for student engagement in classroom learning activities will only strengthen the overall academic outcomes as well as the intention of your policies. Grading policies and procedures are the underpinnings for the earning of academic credits. Strengthening common guidelines across your classrooms for applying measures of in-class participation, progress in learning activities will only add value to all your students' results, such that it's not just passing classes, but is in engaging your students in the learning that will truly strengthen the academic shift in your eligibility policy that made such a difference this year. Madam President, that concludes my remarks. I would be pleased to respond to any questions or observations.
Thank you, Dr. Jager. Mr. Stridiron, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Yeager, thank you for your report. I know that it's not been an easy year to gather all this information, and you probably wanted some more information if you could get it in person, maybe next year. What my question concerns is the attendance rate of 91% as it affects next year's eligibility for students. The information that the board has been provided weekly about attendance has a rate of about 65% at NFA Main, 73% at NFA North, and there's a difference in NFA West is 70% in person and 56% virtual. With the numbers of that level, I would find it very difficult to see how many students being eligible for activities in the school. Have you found in your research some kind of numbers that you can provide to us, some kind of a warning about what's going to happen next September, this September coming up for eligibility?
Well, Mr. Stridiron, this is an excellent question that you posed. It replicates exactly a conversation I've had with your administrative team. And I know it is their intention to come forward with approaches and recommendations to address this. But in our public conversation here at your board meeting, I will suggest the following. Clearly, the uniqueness of this year with the totally online to hybrid learning systems, to some in, some out, some totally out of school, the attendance process of all of that has been its own unique feature and probably has influenced the depression in the overall attendance statistics that you cited, and they are close, as you've cited them, to the kinds of numbers that I have seen in my research and conversation with the board. So what I think is important for the board and working with the administration going forward is to conceive of a process that recognizes that the 91% standard was not met, but you're not off the hook as a student about that. You don't just get a pass. You have some kind of probationary status with respect to getting back on your feet, becoming a more routine and engaged attender of school in the first marking period, and you get involved in that way. Now, there's structures and processes that would have to be undertaken to do that. There would be conversations with families that would have to do that. But a high standard for attendance is one of the features that distinguishes your school district as an ambition standard. But this has been a different year, and I think what would be valuable is to create a transitional bridge between the depressed attendance and participation going into next year to get the process back on the high standard of 91%. And I know those conversations are underway, sir, and I was involved in some of them on a developmental basis. I believe you'll hear more from the administrative team. So that's all I have to say.
Mr. Forget?
Thank you, Madam President. As Mr. Stridiron points out, when you look at comprehensive student attendance and the average attendance rates in the district, using that as a measure to determine eligibility is something that we have had conversations about. So what is fair for next year is something we're taking very seriously. We did see success with the academic contracts, and the consideration of attendance contracts is something we're in the exploration about. We look forward to really digging into that data this summer. And again, it's the pandemic impact that we're seeing. I think we were really well on our way to focusing on academics and attaching that to eligibility throughout this year, even during the pandemic.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. Mr. Levinstein?
Thank you, Madam President. So firstly, I want to thank Dr. Yeager for his deep dive into these issues. And I was just going to suggest, and Mr. Forget and Dr. Yeager kind of went that path, that maybe we should be following some of the recommendations because of this deep dive and his understanding of what the problems are and what might be a better way to fix some of these problems, that we take a deep look into his recommendations, how he feels we might be able to deal with the pandemic and deal with attendance issues in general. So I hope that our district works towards that end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levinstein. Mr. Stridiron, I see your hand again.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to follow up with Dr. Yeager. I understand his approach to having COVID as an understanding that it was a difficult year for attendance. But when you look at what qualified as being present for attendance, this was the easiest year to qualify for attendance. You literally had to show up and log on and just be there for a short period of time. Or if you didn't log on at all, you had to turn in an assignment by midnight. It was actually easier this year to be marked present and attending than it was the previous year. So I would rather have high standards for attendance. And the students were told at the beginning of the year, they had that meeting, they were told 91% attendance, this is a rule, we're going to stick by it. And then we're going to say, you're going to change the policy and say, oh no, you don't really have to go this year, but now this year, yes, you will. They're not going to believe us because you have to have some kind of standards. It's like a parent. You keep on changing your standards and lowering your standards, your kids are just going to figure out a way to get around it. So I would prefer not to change the policy. I would prefer to, have the students, if they have to go to summer school to get the 4.5 credits, they have to do that. There's not going to be a pass for that. And if you have an attendance standard for, instead of being 91%, maybe you could say, okay, we can understand some of the absences, but to have a rate of 65%, that's just unacceptable. And that doesn't include the excused absences. So you have to take a look at it. I would prefer not to lower the standards because attendance, just like the sign says at NFA Main and NFA North, attendance matters.
Thank you, Mr. Stridarn. I'm going to go to Dr. Jager.
I have to make sure I lower my hand, Madam President, so it doesn't just hang up there. Mr. Stridarn, I think your point is well taken. We talked about this at length in advance of this scheduled season of activity, the point that you made. You'll note in my remarks tonight that I was clear in my recommendation that coming back to an in-class learning model, we had to look very strongly at what student engagement and learning meant. And if you're going to be in class and participating in the next round of earning academic credit, then it has to be a substantial notion about what participation in learning means. This year's standard was judged to have certain necessary conditions to it. The submission of assigned work was the standard. You have an opportunity within the school personnel, have an opportunity in working with your staff to give guidance, develop guidance, join as faculties in making judgments about what it means to earn participation credit as part of your learning experience. And it doesn't mean a change in policy. It means strengthening the expectations for what students will be expected to do. That was a part of my remarks. I believe that's important to strengthen this policy going into next year. And I think it's certainly consistent with one of the observations you're making just now. The concern that that you've raised about amending or not amending the policy, it remains for your administrative team to work with you as a board to create the implementation strategy going forward. But I would suggest that there is a strong stance to be taken that you don't get a pass. You are on probation and you have obligations to live to the standard of in-class learning that we are going to start in the new year. It's an important opportunity. It's a transitional opportunity. I don't think it takes any teeth out of your policy. It requires teacher implementation, teacher training, use of your grading and attendance systems. Those are all within the sphere of possibility. I know your administrative team very much wants to see this happen. The attention to academic success received more attention than attention to attendance success. And that's an observation I'm making as your external compliance officer. I'm not faulting your team for that, but it's a fair observation to say not as much time was focused or attention on what's really going on with our students within the attendance sphere. That can be corrected next year, and that is my recommendation.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Mr. Forget.
Thank you, Madam President. Just building off of what Dr. Jager just shared. I know that there's some that do believe that this was an easy year for solid attendance, but it wasn't an easy year for all kids. And every kid was confronted with different obstacles throughout this year in this pandemic. And each child had to address and deal with their own haves and their have-nots. And I think we've got to keep that in mind. Not every student had the same resources that other students had. So I want to be careful not to just say that this was the easiest year to succeed in attendance, because from listening to some of the students, and Dr. Padilla has spoken to students from across the state with the way that this pandemic has impacted them, I just want to be careful not to say that it was an easy year for good attendance, because I don't agree.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. Mrs. Burton?
Hi, thank you, Madam President. So I think it was a wonderful opportunity to work with this cohort of athletes and artists that have this motivational component, right? And to be able to, provide them what they need in order to get this activity that they so desire, right? And so how do we shift that, right? And I think Mr. Levinson started, like, how do we take the best of what this provided? And then with student engagement and learning, how do we begin to provide these other magnificent opportunities and programs that excite our kids so that they want to come to school, and hence they want to do well academically? But, we had this motivator, right? Sports. I mean, those are young people who are just, a little driven, maybe more driven than some. I don't know. I can't measure who's more driven than another. But, how do we transition that? And I think, I don't know if you need to answer the question, but that would be my biggest dream here in our district, that, we could provide these opportunities that just excite kids. Every kid is not going to be an athlete. Every kid is not going to be an artist, or, however, we have STEM and we have other opportunities, right? And how do we just provide all of these opportunities to excite kids to just want to come to school and do well, both academically and, in the meantime, they reach their attendance goals. So that's just my dream here.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. It's a great dream. Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. So I just want to thank Mr. Yeager for his report, and I want to also agree with we made comments that this was one of the easiest years. We always got to look at this from an equity lens. And when you say it was so easy for who? When we talk about this pandemic and the impact that it has had on the people in our community, it has been devastating to some people. And this is a time, I think, with the suggestion that Mr. Yeager is making, that we can really boost morale and starting in September, saying this is what we're going to do going forward. If we base eligibility and participation in the fall on what happened this past year of pandemic, it's not fair to the children. It's not fair. just me alone. And I got to be perfectly honest with you, Madam.
Mr. Howard, I'm sorry, I think you froze there for a minute. Are you okay?
It's frozen, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm coming to you, Dr. Jager. You're next.
Madam President, I just got kicked off again. I mean, to really hold children accountable for what has happened in this world, what has happened in our community, what has happened in this district is just unfair. I would like to, I agree with Mr. Yeager's suggestion about starting in September. And I just want to say that when you talk about how easy and how great it was, or how simple it was, for who? That's the question we need to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. I'm going to move on to Dr. Jager. Go ahead.
We have to be fair to every.
Mr. Howard, we can't hear you, so we muted your mic.
Go ahead, Dr. Jager. It's your turn.
Madam President, I just wanted to build upon Ms. Burton's observations. In the materials you've received, and based on my many conversations with your co-principals, the director of secondary, Mr. Ford, as well as Mr. Forget, your team over time, Mr. Howard, the athletic director, Ms. Keach, what has been very evident, and they self-report, which I find to be an exciting potential for the future, and it is exactly around what Ms. Burton has suggested. And that is that athletics and fine arts participation and students who are vulnerable and at risk among them, that is but a subset of your overall student body. The process that was learned, intensified, the contracting system, the follow through, the parent communication, the meetings, the multidisciplinary teams that took place to strengthen and build greater integrity into your eligibility system. What your co-principals report is that this is going to be a lesson learned about what all students in your schools have an opportunity to receive in the way of review and attention and teamwork to follow through and communicate with interventions. And if that was not a particular objective of the work of this year, but I think as a springboard for 21-22, I believe your school leaders are excited to take the lessons learned from this compliance year and apply it to school in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stradiner?
Thank you, Madam President. I need to clarify, I didn't say that it was an easy year for the students. Mr. Howard has it wrong. I said it was an easy year for that the system was set up to qualify for being in attendance. That's a big difference. The system made it easier to be qualified as being present. It is not an easy year for anybody, let alone our students. And I don't appreciate being mischaracterized like this. So that's what I said, and that's what I meant.
Thank you. And we're not going to go back and forth. So Mr. Howard, if you're going to go back and forth, I'm not going to call on you. You have a comment? Please comment.
Yes, my comment was to Mr. Forge's statement. I had nothing, I didn't say anything about Mr. Stradiner. I agree with what Mr. Forge said. So
thank you for the clarity. Mr. Levinstein?
So my point about attendance is that there are students that might be embarrassed or ashamed by turning on a camera in their house for a class. So I don't know how easy it is for everyone to sign into their classes. And I think there may be students that just feel funny or awkward or embarrassed by doing that, and it may not be that easy for them to get 100% attendance. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Dr. Padilla.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a couple quick points. One, when we say the system, I think it's important to just be super clear that we're talking about the New York State Department of Education system and what they required of school districts and the level of flexibility this past year, given everything you guys just indicated. Certainly, we don't want to misunderstand what easier means. I mean, if we just take tonight's board meeting, it's kind of hard to hear a lot of people because of their internet bandwidth. So, I mean, our teachers did express a lot of frustration, even with their own internet access, and certainly that of our families. I think tonight is just one example of how we're trying to listen to board members, and it's hard to understand them and hear them, etc.
Thank you. Mrs. Burton?
All right, so this is my last comment on this one. And I just want to respond to Mr. Howard in terms of his passion around September. And so I guess it's a question statement. I don't know sometimes if I'm asking a question or just making a statement. But attendance, I think, yes, we have the expectation. I think we always have to have a high expectation. However, we can also reward effort. And I think that's another component of if a student is progressing, you know, I feel no matter what, we should still reward them. Because let's just take sports and, you know, particularly basketball, you know, particularly those sports that are mainly our participants are from, you know, maybe a certain community, and I won't go into details, in communities that offer some challenges. And basketball or sports is just what they have, right? However, you know, should we, I think we should always reward effort. And everybody doesn't necessarily begin at the same place, but if you're making strides, you know, I think that should be considered. And if those strides are consistent.
Thank you. I think we've had a really great conversation. So thank everybody. And thank you, Dr. Jager. I'm going to move on to the rest of my items. So let's move. I have items 5.2 through 5.7 as a consent agenda for your consideration. Would any member like to separate out any items? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So move.
Ms. Burton has her hand up to separate.
Yeah, I'd like to separate out 5.3.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion on everything but 5.3.
So move.
Second. Thank you. Questions or discussion on these items except for 5.3? Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a question on student policy goals, which is 5.5. In the third paragraph, it states that the district will commit to taking action to breaking down institutional barriers that hinder a student's opportunity to learn, resulting in an instructional program that prepares students for an ever-changing world. Could someone provide an example of an institutional barrier that is hindering our students' opportunity to learn?
Mrs. Burton, do you want to answer that one? No, you're waving at me, but I'm not sure you want to talk. Mr. Ford, would you like to answer that? Or can you?
I'd be happy to have the conversation. These policies are all equity driven. These policies were created by a team of teachers, administrators, and then vetted by parents. So this particular comment that you're bringing up, if I address taking action to break down institutional barriers, what are things that we create as a school system that prevent students from access? So it could be a policy, it could be a resource, it could be an expectation that some students or individuals may not have the resources to address. We have to really think about what we're expecting and what are the barriers that prevent certain individuals from accessing or learning.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Sturdine, your hand's up again.
Yeah, I just thank Mr. Forget for that response. I just didn't know if there was a specific institutional barrier that has been identified by the administration to be removed. I was hoping that there would be something there that we can focus on, that we can address, but it just seems like it's wording that's put in there just in case something arises that you find, and then we'll tackle it. So it's nothing specific that we can have identified right now. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Stridarian, at this point, but it sets the standard by which we have to operate and keep our attention towards. If you're aware of something, I would be very happy to hear about it.
Thank you. Mrs. Burton, do you have a comment on any of these other ones, or do you want to talk about 5.3?
No, so I have an example from Mr. Stridarian and for the school district is to take a look at the disparities in between students who graduate with a Regents diploma, the numbers, and those that graduate with an advanced Regents diploma. And I'll leave it at that, Mr. Stridarian. You do your homework. Okay?
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Dr. Padilla.
Yeah, just to build on Mr. Forget's response, because here it is about the, the policies do set the standard, but I hope we're not fooling ourselves by saying that our system doesn't have institutional barriers. Ms. Burton just referenced one of them. We certainly can look at who's recommended for special ed. We can look at resources provided to various kids. We can look at access to programs. So do all of our programs reflect the demographics of the district? Disproportionality in how the code of conduct is used. I mean, there are certain things that we certainly have talked about, but what's important in this policy is we're setting a standard that when we do recognize a institutional barrier, we're addressing them.
Thank you. Mr. Howard.
Oh, man.
He's totally gone. Okay, thank you. So we're done with conversation. Let's roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarian,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's go back to item 5.3. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Mrs. Burton, I'm going to call on you first.
Okay, so well, I have a lot of concerns about this one. Not that it's a policy, but I think it's not just district recruiting. It's also includes interviewing, hiring, and also retaining. And in our diversity committee, we had some really robust conversations with employees of color, and we talked about recruitment strategies, which these bullets miss a couple of them. I mean, the last meeting was really robust, including really creating pathways internally. We talked about that, the whole grow your own. Not and yes, we talked about, a pathway for students, but what is that going to look like, right? What does that look like specifically? And then the other piece is our based on our conversation, our staff of color, they need support. They need support in terms of, of navigating the internal systems when they're considered the minority, although our kids of color are the majority, right? And so we have to look at that. And I just think it needs work overall. And there could be some more work to this. The other thing around higher institutions, I'm a graduate of a historically Black college. And I think we already have data in terms of how challenging it has been to recruit, potential teachers from our historically Black institutions. And part of that is coming to a Newburgh, New York that doesn't have much to offer, right? And so another conversation was really about a robust marketing, to reinvent our marketing plan to include, really what's, the happenings in this community from a community perspective, not just from a district perspective, but bring in the community to rant and rave about, what's happening in the community. I just think it needs a little bit more work, not much, but some.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. I see Mr. Forge's hand.
Thank you, Madam President. In response to Ms. Burton's comments, we did listen to your comments at the last meeting, and we did address the grow your own through the third bullet of the fourth paragraph, where we're really going to think about the students that are seniors to begin to counsel those seniors to consider entering the field of education and having them return to the community, whether to be employed within the district or a business or organization within the community. It's something that we've been considering for some time now, and now we're putting it in policy. But I think what you raise is more of, so how do you bring this policy to life? How do you bring these things to life through specific actions that we need to take in order to accomplish them? And I think we can do that through a regulation. So I think if we're okay with, if these are the standards, how do we get more clear on how do we make sure that this comes to life and does happen and generates the diverse recruitment that we're hoping for? And that would be done between myself, Dr. Padilla, and Mr. McLemore and Ms. Felice, creating a regulation aligned with the district hiring policy, which I don't think we've done in the past. So I think it does need a little bit of work, but I think that can be done through a regulation if you would consider that.
I think what Mrs. Burton is asking, Mr. Forget, is the student, helping the students to become employees of the district is one thing. That's long-term goal. What about a career ladder for people who are employed that want to move to be a teacher, to be a supervisor, to be a central office administrator? Those kinds of things. I think, and I did speak to Mrs. Burton before this meeting just about this, and I agree with her. We need to have a career ladder for community people who want to volunteer and then become teacher aides, teacher assistants, teachers, etc. So I think that needs to also be involved.
Can I respond?
Sure, yes.
Great. So we have started to work on that through the pipeline activities in the district. Mr. McLemore and Ms. Felice are currently working on recruiting teacher aides to become teaching assistants and some of the work around that. But we can get much more intentional in when we develop our leadership pipeline. It's not just taking individuals that want to be in titled leadership positions. It's how do we grow our own and develop individuals that want to go into the field of buildings and grounds, or the maintenance department, or the construction department, or whatever it is. So we can expand the pipeline to include those particular components into that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Stridiron.
Really enjoying this conversation. I appreciate Mr. Burton for bringing this up because you're really on tonight. Your energy is incredible. I really appreciate that. I did have a question about the first paragraph. It talks about one of the focuses on the candidates being culturally competent. Is there a metric that the interviewers are going to use to determine how someone is culturally competent?
Ms. Felice or Mr. McLemore, you guys want to?
Thank you, Dr. Padilla. So one of the ways that you can elicit or get a sense or feel of that is by the questions that are asked. So we have diversity questions, there's behavior questions, there are situational questions. So those questions, when pinpointed, will elicit specific information. If you just ask common questions or general questions, for example, tell me a little bit about yourself. That's just going to give you some information about the individual. But if you pinpoint the question and ask specific questions related to diversity or inclusion or cultural competence, then that will give you information. The candidate will give you information regarding those specifics. So we have to pinpoint our questions and be more direct in the information that we want to receive.
And then I would add to that New York State has produced a number of key documents relating to the exact content of what you're asking. So there's a culturally responsive sustaining education framework and roadmap. The roadmap was just released probably a week or two ago. The framework was released last year. So as long as districts, align to those critical documents, they should be right where Mr. McLemore is talking.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I'm going to say this again. I believe that we as a district need to print out some type of employment booklet, etc., that outlines and identifies who our community is, and in discussing its diversity, talk about our expectations and how important engagement of all students is, and how that will be translated not only in the classroom, but outside the classroom as well. I think we have to give a lot of focus on what we want as a community, and let it be known to teachers that the state has guidelines to show involvement in equity and cultural responsiveness and the like, because it means something. It's not a fad. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Burton, your hand is down. Do you have something to say?
I did. I in this document, I also I circled for myself that we want to fill with highly qualified and competent personnel, and I think for me it kind of aligns back with Dr. Rick Yeager's report and my saying, when do we identify, everyone's not going to come, highly qualified, right? A young person out of a teacher ed program may not necessarily be highly qualified and fully competent, right? However, in our process, and I'm listening to Mr. Walker as well, how do we ensure that we may not start out with someone who's highly qualified, but with very intentional professional development and with a clear understanding of what diversity is and what kind of community that we a lot of kids are coming from, and they're culturally responsive. They understand that piece of it, and then provide those mentors, right? And I know a young woman now, she's on the personnel and as a sub, and I kind of heard that she's trying to get into the district. Bright young woman. I know her family. Her sister's a teacher here in the school district. And so it's kind of like, how do you look at her and see something and see the brilliance, right? She may not have the basics moving in as an educator, as a teacher, but she has so much potential. And so how do you also identify potential? And then give them, almost like our kids, and give them all the support they need to just be, outstanding educators, because they have the ability, they just need the opportunity as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Go ahead, Mr.
Okay. Two things. I think that teachers, beginning teachers, come to a school district on a variety of levels. Some were born to be teachers. That's just it. That's what they're going to do. And they're going to break their necks to be the best teacher that they can be in that classroom. Others will come in and go like, oh, please, I got tenure, I got a job for 40 years, blah, 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 blah. I can coach for the rest of my life, and I've already gone to the elitist school and, whatever. But the more we talk about, as a district, engaging students and looking to see that students are engaged, I think we'll start to move up the ladder. I think too, if we talk about with teachers, most teachers have one thing in common, I believe, and that is the love of their subject matter. They will go through H and high water because they love their subject matter. And we can provide opportunities where we engage teachers, how to teach your class better, how to do this. I think that will work. And if we put it on paper where teachers can see it, or possible employees will see it, they go, oh, this is a place I want to be because I'm engaged myself.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Do you have another comment? Because I've got to move us along.
No, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Maida?
Yes.
Ms. Beneo?
Yes.
Ms. Santiago?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items. That was a great discussion. We're going to move on to our Deputy Superintendent, Mr. Forget.
Thank you, Madam President. I have two items this evening on a consent agenda, both around shared decision-making.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Maida?
Yes.
Ms. Beneo?
Yes.
Ms. Santiago?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
That concludes my item, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction Secondary, Mr. Bayer.
Thank you, Madam President. The Curriculum Instruction Secondary has 3 items, 7.1 through 7.3, but we would like to amend 7.3.
No. I think we have to separate it out, Mr. McCoy.
Yeah, I would take the 7, 1, and 2 on consent. And take 7, 3, 7.
Okay, so Mr. Bayer, you want to amend 7.3, correct?
Correct.
All right, so let's take 7.1 and 7.2. Anybody else want to separate out any of those items? I'd like to entertain a motion on those 2 items, please.
So moved. Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call on 7.1 and 7.2, please.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes?
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinson.
Yes.
So we have item 7.3. I'd like to entertain a motion to amend this item.
Point of order.
Okay, sorry.
Got to put it on the floor first. And then
Oh, okie dokie. I'd like to entertain a motion on 7.3, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Can I have a motion to amend this item?
Motion to amend.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Bear, can you tell us about the amendment, please?
Sure. So it's amendment to add 10 additional administrators and teachers to the conference in San Diego, August 8th through August 12th, through the Arizona State University and the Global Silicon Valley Conference.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call to amend?
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo.
Yes. So now we have an amended motion on the floor. Are there any questions, right? Yes,
Ms. Mayo, can I just have a point of clarity?
sure.
So I just want to point out these folks are going to San Diego, would be paid for out of Title II funds. Just want to make that clear as well.
Thank you. Board members, questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. Bear. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services, Dr. Roman.
Thank you, Madam President. Under the Student Support Services agenda, we have 1 item for your consideration, 8.1 recommendations from CSE CPSE.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Dr. Roman. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Dr. Spindler.
Madam President, I present to you items 9.1 through 9.14 as a consent agenda for this evening.
Would any member like to separate out any item? Mr. Stridiron.
9.2, please.
Anyone else? I'd like to entertain a motion on 9.1 through 9.14 minus 9.2.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on those items? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
yes,
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stradari,
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Let's move on to item 9.2. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Mr. Stradine.
Thank you, Madam President. So this resolution states that the item is for topographical survey, boundary determination, and ground penetrating radar. And then there was a additional content saying that there was some kind of a grading plan, like a site plan that was part of this, but the actual contract doesn't state that at all. It just says boundary and topographical survey work, and then GPR utility location. So that is a base map for future design use that will be used not only for the site plan for the town, if you have to present it to the town, but also you're right up against a state highway. And since if you're planning on putting a parking lot there, the DOT is going to want to get involved. You're putting an entrance within 100 feet of a state highway. So does this proposal for $10,700 for topo and boundary work include site plan, grading plans, for proposed work?
Velez?
Yes, I see Mr. Velez. Mr. Velez, you're muted.
Excuse my voice, I'm a little sick. Mr. Tree Island, the fee includes the civil design portion of the project. Also, this would cover the stormwater, permanent easement, design and preparation, grading, and it's also going to look at the existing retaining wall when we take the building down, how to repair that once the building is down. That's all included in the proposal. You are right, they didn't put that when they wrote it down, but that's what we agree on. And we got an email from them to confirm that.
So the contract needs to be revised before it's finalized to include that work, because then for that scope of work, that price is reasonable. The other question that I had for Mr. Shaw would be, since this is not part of the capital bond, would this work have to be bid out to other vendors to give them an opportunity to provide pricing? Because this is not part of the capital bond.
The requirement to go out for an RFP would be based upon the thresholds in the purchasing and procurement policy. So it would have to be benchmarked against that.
Which is $20,000.
And then the other item I asked for last time was provide a structural engineer's report. Since you're saying that the Board of Education will be declaring an emergency project to demolish the old Bonneville School, based on what structural engineer's report? Not, I hope not something from 13 years ago. Do you have an updated structural engineer's report that says that that building must come down immediately?
Will someone respond to that, please? Mr. Velez.
Sure. Mr. Tree Island, yes, 13 years ago, this building was supposed to come down, and we have all those reports. And based on that, when the state education department contact us that we either knock the building down or repair it, which we don't think we can repair it because there's no septic for us to connect to, they said that based on the resolution that passed in 2008, with an architect evaluation of the building and the necessary forms, they will approve the emergency demolition of the building. Our architect CPL, Mr. Colby, provide that letter, and we have all the documents in process to be prepared to go to the state education department.
But you don't have a structural engineer's report saying that the building must come down. I understand that it's a want. Is it a need? Because the situation with that building, to remove that building is going to cost, how much is going to fully cost to remove that building and do it properly?
Well, at this point, I don't think it's a want or a need. The state education department told us we have to do it. It's something that when we did the fire inspection, and as we do every fire inspection every year, we had to send a report, and the report in that building is that it's closed because it's not safe to go in. And I've been doing that report for the last 21 years. And in 2008, they asked us what to do. And this year, they didn't ask. They basically said to us, we need to do something with this building because it's unsafe. And again, when we discussed this with the state, they said we have to, based on the 2008 report, get an architectural letter saying that the building can come down. And we do have that report. Also, BOCES came and evaluated the building for the state. They looked at it after the fire inspection, and they also recommend that due to the state of the building, we need to remove the building.
So, Madam President, I asked at the last board meeting that information be provided to the board, and to this date, we still have not received that. I would love to review that information before voting on this, but I don't know. Can we have that information?
Mr. Velez, can you or Dr. Spindler just forward me that information? And I don't recall this specific request. We're actually pretty good at responding to board members' requests. But as Mr. Velez indicated, by way of BOCES and the state ed department, the district doesn't have a choice in this matter.
Mr. Levinstein, I see your hand.
Madam President, I'd just like to ask that we vote on this and let the people vote how they would like to vote.
Thank you. Anybody else, questions, comments? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
Can't vote yes. I'm going to vote no because I don't have the information.
Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, you're on mute, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Burton?
Yes.
That concludes my items for this evening.
Madam President, can I just get a quick confirmation on whether these materials were provided? Dr. Spindler?
Yep. So the information that I had, I did provide to go into the Board of Ed Weekly last week. The structural engineering, I don't have anything recent other than the observations provided by the OU BOCES and what has been determined through the fire inspection, as Mr. Velez indicated. The fire inspection one, I will scan and put forward into the Board of Ed Weekly this week. I just also would like the community and the board to know that this is an opportunity in this resolution for us to learn a little bit more about the property, and we'll be furnished information through this resolution to tell us more about when the property is surveyed and scanned, obviously to learn more about it. This is not a resolution to demolish the building, although we have been given very substantive evidence for people and experts in the field to say that it should be.
Thank you.
Dr. Spindler?
Yes, that concludes my items. I had said it before. I apologize.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 10.1, excuse me, through 10.22 for your consideration on tonight.
Mr. McLemore, take a nice sip of water before we go on. Would any member like to separate out any item? Mr. Stridarn?
10.19 and 10.21.
Anybody else? Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion on 10.1 through 10.22 minus 10.19 and 21. I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on those other items? On the majority of items? Mr. Stridarn, do you have your hand up to ask a question on those other items? Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay, got it. Roll call on those, on the majority of the items.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes,
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
let's move on to item 10.19. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Mr. Stridarn.
I know I can't really discuss the contents of the agreement. I just want to let the public know I just cannot, in good conscience, vote to accept this agreement.
Okay. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes,
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
No.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
let's move on to item 10.21. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes,
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
No.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes.
Madam President, I'd like to request permission to add 4 items.
let's take them one at a time, Mr. McLemore. Let's start with the first one. Would you like to tell us, or would you like to read that item, please?
Yes, Madam President. First item is, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of an assistant principal at NFA Main Campus, Mr. Robert Schuss, effective July 31st, 2021.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes,
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
No.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes.
okay, so now we've added it to the agenda. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes,
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
No.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yeah.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida.
Yes.
Mr. McLemore, let's go to your second item to add. Please read it.
Thank you, Madam President. Be it resolved that the employee number 062221-2 shall be suspended with pay during the pendency of said Section 3020A education law proceedings.
I'd like to entertain a motion to add.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call to add.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
yes,
Ms. Mineo.
Yes. So now I'd like to entertain a motion, please, on that item.
So move.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Stridarn, remember this is a personnel issue?
Yeah, I understand. Is this the first person or the second person that we discussed in executive session? Because I don't know.
The first.
The first.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Stridarn,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
yes,
Ms. Mineo,
Yes,
Ms. Santiago.
Yes.
thank you. Let's go to our third item, Mr. McLemore.
Be it resolved that employee number 062221-3 shall be suspended with pay during the pendency of said Section 3020A education law proceedings.
I'd like to entertain a motion to add this to the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call to add.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
yes,
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn.
No.
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion on this item, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
yes,
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
No.
Mr. Walker.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's move on to your fourth item, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education of the New Bergen Large City School District hereby designates that the following individuals are eligible for appointment to participate in summer professional development at Bombville School.
Sorry, I'd like to entertain a motion to add, please.
So moved.
second,
Roll call to add.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
yes,
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton.
Yes.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
yes,
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. We're going to move on to the clerk of the board, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the approval of minutes from the June 8th, 2021 meeting.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
yes,
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton, Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. We're on the section for public comments on non-agenda items. Mr. McCoy, I know we have one. Would you like to read it?
Yes, ma'am. There was one comment submitted from Miss Colette Rotullo. My name is Colette Rotullo, and I'm a teacher at NFA Maine and the mother of an 8th grader at Temple Hill Academy. I'm writing this email in hopes that the drive-through celebrations will continue, even though COVID will hopefully be a thing of the past. The drive-through celebration I experienced with my son was absolutely amazing. The teachers, staff, and administration put a wonderful experience for the children, which included music, water guns, snacks, and so much more. When my son turned to me and asked if this was done every year, I said I hoped it would continue. Please consider carrying on these celebrations. Thank you. That was the only comment submitted on non-agenda items, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Mr. Howard, you have your hand up. Is there something you need to say?
Just wanted to make a statement, Madam President. I would like to, at this point in time, thank our colleague Sylvia Santiago for her years of service, and I would like to wish her success in her future endeavors.
Thank you. I'd like to second that. We're going to miss you, Sylvia. We're going to miss you. We have to go into executive session. So be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose: employment history of particular individuals and to obtain advice from legal counsel. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
We'll move.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yeah.
Ms. Santiago.
I just want to say before I might vote, sorry to just grab this moment. I just wanted to thank all of you as well. I've had a real pleasure working with everyone here, and I appreciate everyone's lens in bringing it to better our community, to better, our education for our students. Thank you, and I vote yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Hold on.
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinson.
Yes.
We will not be doing business when we come back from executive session.